Hi guys, my name is Danielle Daru, and today I'm going to be presenting to you The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Matsuo Basho. For the history of the author, where and when he was born, Basho was born in Tokyo, Japan during the Edo period. For the occupation, he was an apprentice for a samurai war general of his region, Todo Yoshiada. Family and siblings. Basho's family were samurai. His father taught calligraphy. He had six siblings, but very little was really known about them. We do know that he had a brother named Hazuman. We also know that Hazuman had at least one son, but we only really know this bit of information because Basho lived with his nephew towards the very end of his life. For education, Basho's education was not in a compulsory setting like it is today, of course. However, he still learned through apprenticeship and studying. He learned calligraphy, Chinese literature, art, and war. Later in his life, he studied Buddhism, Taoism, Haiku, which later became haiku, and philosophy. For writing, Basho wrote about nature and mortality, heavily contemplating it as he aged. Basho really seeks to find beauty, peace, and understanding immortality in the natural world around us. Just a brief summary. The history of the time period the text was produced. For a brief summary of the text, Narrow Road to the Deep North is Basho's personal journal as he and his friend Sora traveled into Japan's undeveloped land. The book is a mix of diary entries and poetry from Sora as well as himself and a few other companions that you'll notice throughout the text. Um, for a bit of context into this a bit, Christianity was just introduced to Japan's southernmost regions. To preserve the Japanese culture, Japan isolated itself for the next 3 centuries. Um, so the idea of an undisturbed Japan really fascinates him. He wanted to make this journey not for the physically untouched Japan, but also the undisturbed spirituality of preserved Japan. Thus, the narrow road to the deep north. All right, a little bit of history of the time period this text was produced. Um, Basho lived during the Tokugawa period. Tokugawa Ieyasu seized control of Japan and produced the shogunate period to Japan. This was the militant hierarchy of samurai that overseed the rulings of the emperor. So they were pretty much the neck to the head. The head was the emperor and they were the neck. Really turning Japan in the direction that the the shogun felt fit. Um, During this time, Japan isolated itself from the outside world for roughly the next 200 plus years. This gave futile Japan time to flourish really in the arts, gave it time for the arts. Um, it really saturated itself in culture at this point. Um, Thus, we bring us to the Japanese Renaissance. Um, this happened about 100 years after the European Renaissance, just for a little bit of context, as well. And I also have included a video that I highly recommend that explains the Japanese Edo period, provides a bit more context on the period as well that um, I may not have touched on. For significant passages, I've chosen "The passing spring," "Birds mourn," "Fish weep with tearful eyes." This haiku symbolizes the passing of spring, the seasons being personified as organic, just like us. The animal kingdom and the naturalistic aspects of this world really understand the transition as the literal passing of the season with the rebirth of the next season, just like human life. The second passage that I have chosen is the moon was bright and divinely pure upon the sand brought in by Bishop Hugo. Here, Basho is admiring the beauty of the evening, comparing the tranquility of the Bishop Hugo, the Buddhist monk who inspired Basho's travels. Hugo traveled to India on a spiritual quest as well, all on foot, um, bringing back the famous Ganges River sand that's used still. Pretty interesting, actually. For the relevancy of the text at the time versus the relevancy today, we're going to start with the role the text played at the time. Um, at the time, the narrow road to the deep north was well received because it represented Buddhist philosophy in the way that Basho represents humanity being connected to the earth. But it can also be seen politically. Not only is life uncertain, but so is political status in feudal Japan. The relevancy of the text today. What was significant about the text today? Basho works with timeless spiritual, philosophical, and environmental themes. He touches on industrialization in an organic world. He also touches on life and death and the emotional spectrum that comes along with mortality. He deep dives into the human condition and still manages to drop a poem really in the middle of existential dread, which I find kind of beautiful as someone who suffers with anxiety. Um, to pair the text with something from our times today, I would like to make the connection between basically his want to view undisturbed Japan. Basho makes the connection between us and nature and a common theme in his writing. I believe this can directly be related to conservation efforts that we see today to stop industrializationism or even the gentrification of our neighborhoods. Basho sees the beauty and the interconnection that we have with nature and is really calling us to protect it. Um, I think that Basho really sought to see Japan for everything it had to offer, unchanged and preserved. And I think that we could really look at that when we're looking at gentrification in our neighborhoods today. Um, he's really calling us to protect it in a way. What do others say about this text? During my research, I found an interesting video by Clark Grubb. He talks a lot about the translation issue. The Japanese language has a lot more depth than the English language. Um, so some of the understanding really is lost. Um, in the language itself, but also in like the haiku structure. Um, haikus are usually made up of three lines. The first line and the third line usually have seven or five syllables, and then the middle line has seven syllables. Kind of like 575. And really, in a lot of the haikus, especially the haikus that I've chosen from the text itself today, there are four lines, which is very uncommon for haikus, but he is the master. He is the renowned as like the father of the haiku. He really takes the haiku from being these like kind of dirty, like raunchy, like funny, humorous, really light-hearted poetry with very minimal lines to something kind of profound and beautiful. Um, and I think it really just takes Japan by storm. Um, Something I learned from this, as well as the to really like open my eyes to the translation, I found it really intriguing about Basho's pen name. Um, It came from a banana plant that one of his students gifted him. and he planted it in his own garden. And after it bloomed, he really just found it so beautiful that he took to the name Masio Basho. Basho genuinely translates to banana plant, which I think is really, really cool as somebody who gardens. All right. I have also included a video that I highly recommend that you guys check out. At the end, I'll have it linked from Clark himself, and it really goes into what we just talked about. Moving on to my next and last slide, I have two questions for you guys, and I think it would be really fun to really deep dive into some of the haikus from his work, and not just from the text, but to kind of see his work in other contexts. Um, this is Basho's most famous haiku. It's an ancient pond, a frog leaps in, the sound of water. This is actually one of the world's most famous haikus in general, not just Basho's, but I would really like to hear you guys' opinion on it and how you interpret this. The next is my personal favorite from him. This is the cicada. The cicada's cry, no sign can foretell how soon it must die. Um, and that's my second question. I'd really like you guys to kind of deep dive into that one and see how you feel with it. Let me know. And then I've also linked the PowerPoint presentation below as well as the video separately so you guys can kind of navigate and check them out on your own. Thank you for your time. Have a great day, you guys.